Howdy, everybody. So I figured I would make you a video with some example sample FRQs for studies. These are going to help you and give you an idea of how AP likes to ask studies questions, as well as the best way to answer them to get a good score, to make sure you include everything. Um, this should help you with the quiz tomorrow, the group quiz. Okay, because some of what is on here is similar to the types of questions that are on that those questions for group quiz tomorrow. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive right into this here. So, when you do a statistics free response question, it's important to get a general idea of what's going on, but don't spend too much time reading the scenario. Like it's yeah, like get a general idea of what's going on, but know that you can always go back to the scenario if there's something that you miss. Okay, so basically what we're talking about here is we're getting parents' opinions about year-round schooling. Okay, the school board is doing a survey to a random sample of 500 families. They gave you the question, okay, and then it says they received responses from 98 of the families. Okay, so that's a red flag to me right there, that they only got about 20% of families replying. Okay, and then they said 76 indicated support for year-round schools. Okay, so then they make the conclusion that based on that, that parents prefer year-round schools. Okay, so I'm hoping that right off the bat, just because of the low response rate, that you see a problem with this. Okay, because I do too. So part A says, what is the possible consequence of non-response bias for interpreting the results of this survey? Okay, so essentially what you want to talk about here is how, well, we only got about 20% of the families to reply. Okay, so let's say responses were only received from, I'm struggling with my typing, about 20% of the families, which was that's the 98 out of 500. Okay, so you could say, then what's the problem? So the results could be biased, right? Due to non-response, due to the non-response of most families selected for the survey. Okay, so what we want to make sure that we talk about here is, we've talked about the issue, right? The issue is that you don't have enough people that have responded to this. And then you need to also explain how this could be either an overestimation or an underestimation, right? So people who care a lot about this issue are much more likely to respond to it. Okay, so so in order for this not to be biased, or rather, okay, what the school board assumed here was that the opinions of the 20% of the people that replied to the survey is the same as the 400 families that didn't reply, which is not necessarily the case, right? So the school board assumed that the opinions of the families that responded were the same as the as the approximately 80% of families that didn't respond. And this is not necessarily the case, right? Or not necessarily true. Okay. So it's possible that families that support year-round school are more likely to respond to surveys, meaning that the survey results here would be an overestimation of the true support for year-round school. Okay, so in my response here, I answered the question, right? I said what the issue was, right? That was the beginning here. What was the issue? And then what that issue is causing, what's the consequence of that. Okay, so whenever they ask you about bias, you always want to make sure you include what the bias is if they don't say it, right? Include what the bias is, why it's a problem, and then what kind of problem does it cause. Is it an overestimation or an underestimation? Okay, so let's look at part B here, which says someone advised at the local school board to take an additional random sample of 500 families and use the combined results. Okay, so keyword there is combined results to make their decision. Okay, and the question is this a good solution? Why or why not? So I'm hoping, again, that this raised some red flags for you, okay? If the first sample was bad, just combining it with another sample does not get rid of the bad data, okay? The non-response bias still exists, okay? So you would say no. So make sure you answer the question, no. The non-response bias still exists, okay? And then, so essentially you'd want to say, combining two samples won't solve the problem because the first sample is affected by non-response bias. Okay. Regardless of what happens in the second sample, there will still be 402 families that didn't respond to the first survey, right? So typically you can answer these questions with like a couple of sentences, okay? All right, so then let's look at part C, which says suggest a different follow-up step from the one in part B. So there's two things that you can do here, okay, with the bad study, right? The with the one with the non-response bias. You can either try to get more data from the people that you already selected, or you could scrap it and start over. Okay, those would be your two options. So you could say contact the 402 families that didn't respond in the first survey and ask their opinion. Okay, and then you may want to note this could require additional phone calls or online polls, like however they gathered their data at the start. Okay, but it will better represent the population of families with at least one elementary school student that support year-round school. Okay, so that's one option. And you could say, or take a new random sample or a census of families using a different data collection method. Okay, right? Because obviously, hold on, using a different data collection method that will increase, hold on, sorry, my formatting's going all nuts. So you want a different data collection method that will increase the response rate. Okay, right? Because if you just repeat the exact same survey that you did at the start when you got the non-response bias, if you scrap that data and then do it again the same way, you're probably going to end up with the same result. Okay. Right, so again, you don't need both of these things for part C, just one or the other. Right. So give me a second to delete the stuff on my screen, erase my screen, and I'll see you back here in just a second for the second problem. All right, so let's take a look at this second question. This one has parts of it that are very common in AP free response questions, especially for studies and experiments. They like to ask questions like this one, where they have you do the things that I'm going to show you here. So let's take a look at this one. So here we are talking about meals in schools. So they're dealing with this company, a school district is, that wants to get new like healthier food into their school district. Okay, so the administration is going to do a survey to figure out what proportion of students in the district are satisfied with the food under the contract. Okay, and then they say that they have two sampling plans. Okay, one is a simple random sample of students. The other is a stratified random sample of students. Okay, so let's talk about these. So part A says, describe a simple random procedure that the administration could use to select 200 students from the 2,500 students in the district to survey. Okay, so again, this is a very common type of question. They love to ask this type of question. You have a word formula for this, meaning that if you kind of memorize the structure, you'll get this right every single time. Okay, so this is the way that you want to describe a simple random procedure, which is, so the people who are doing the survey, so that would be the administrators. So the administrators could, and then, so step one is number everyone in the population from 1 to whatever the total in the population was. So number, so they number the students from 1 to 2,500. You could say in alphabetical order or using an alphabetical list. Okay. Again, because the goal here is to make sure that you get everybody. Right. So start by numbering. Then they can or could use either a random number generator. So use a random number generator. That's usually the best way. A random number generator on a calculator or computer. Okay, to generate. Okay, and then here's the key part of this. 200, right, which is the number of students they want. 200 unique. Oops, sorry, let me turn this off. Unique random integers from 1 to 2,500. Okay, unique is a key word here, right? Because we don't want to sample like just a random student. We don't want their number to be pulled twice. right? We don't want to sample them twice. So we want unique random integers from 1 to 2,500, okay? And then the students corresponding to those 200 numbers would be asked to participate in the survey, okay? No matter what the context, this structure will work every single time. You just have to make sure that you include the context, right? So notice that I'm talking about administrators and students rather than just saying, something very generic, right? You want it to be in the context of the study, okay? All right, let's look at part B, which says, if a stratified random sampling procedure is used, give one example of a variable on which to stratify in the survey. Okay, so the key thing to keep in mind here is that a stratified random sample, the goal of a stratified random sample really is to get representatives from every group in the population to make sure that we get everybody's opinion. Okay, so strata should be, and this is, I wouldn't include this in my answer, like this is just for you all, okay? Like strata should always be, groups should have something in common, or you might hear it called, they should be homogeneous, okay? Like they should have something in common that's different from other groups. So a possible variable to stratify on here, since this is a whole school district, could be age or grade level. Okay, so one possible stratification variable is school slash grade level, or you could think of it as age. So what I mean by that is elementary, middle, and high school. Okay, right? So that's a variable you could stratify on. And then the question is why? Okay, why do I do that? Okay, so you want to stratify by grade level because students at different grade levels, or you could consider it ages, however you described it, may have different opinions or perceptions of the food provided by what was the company called? The HAM company. Okay. Right. Um, so we want to make sure that we include representatives from all of those groups. Right? We don't want to do a simple random sample and then accidentally, or just not accidentally, just because of the natural variability of the world, that we end up with all middle and high school students and not include any elementary school students. Okay. Um, right. So that's basically what you need there. That's all you need. Right. But typically, especially with these like studies questions, you don't have to write a lot as long as you are concise and you answer the question, like you're good. Stop writing. Don't write too much to the point where you end up contradicting yourself, which is what happens a lot. Okay? So, last part here, part C says describe one statistical advantage of using a stratified random sample over a simple random sample. Okay? There are two main statistical advantages to stratified random sampling over simple random sampling. So you just would have to pick one of the two. Okay. The first is that that stratified random samples are usually more accurate. Stratified random samples are typically more accurate than simple random samples because by design, they include representatives from each homogeneous group in this case, elementary, middle, and high school students. Okay, right, so that would be that's the first reason. Okay, or okay, stratified. Right, so more accurate. That's one reason. Or stratified random samples, or sampling rather, guarantees that each of the, and in this case, school level, whoops, my typing, terrible, the school level strata will have some representation. Hold on one second. Get this back up here. Okay, we'll have some representation, as it is possible that a simple random sample would miss one or more of the strata completely. Okay, so I know I talked about representation in both, but really what we're talking about in this first one is that it's more accurate, because because you're dealing with each homogeneous group like on its own, right? So it's a more accurate representation of the entire population, right? And then here, this second reason is that you'll have some representation because a simple random sample might miss one of them. Okay, all right, so those are your sample FRQs. Sorry, this went a little longer than I meant to, but I hope that this was helpful for you in thinking about how you want to answer not just these practice questions for this week, but the group quiz questions and future FRQs. So I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye.